Friday's Mega Millions jackpot drawing could change someone's life drastically in just a matter of a few seconds and a small set of numbers. But the impact of a lottery win doesn't stop once your numbers are drawn or the check is written. Here to talk about that and more is Dr. Melanie Schwartz from Viewpoint Psychology and Wellness. Dr. Schwartz, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate having you on. So there's a lot of buzz about Friday night's Mega Millions drawing. Over $1 billion would be the windfall for someone if they get all the numbers correctly, and they're the only one to draw such a number. $1.02 billion. That's the third largest potential windfall in the history of Mega Millions. Just a small margin away from the second, and of course the largest winning was just a few years ago in South Carolina. So let's talk about lottery fever and why this gets people these sort of headlines and this sort of exorbitant number that's coming up for this particular jackpot gets so many more people involved, because the odds don't change whether you played the lottery 2 weeks ago at that point in time, or you're playing it tonight. In fact, if more people are abuzz about it and more people are playing it, the likelihood that you are going to win may even be a little bit lower. So what really draws people to this, despite knowing that those odds aren't changing?
Because people see a big number. They don't really understand large numbers. So people don't look at the odds. They don't think about the odds. They just see, well, it's over $1 billion. It's a small amount to play. I'm going to try because you know what? There's a chance I could win. They don't look at the chance of winning is 1 in 303 million, which is, to think about that, that's crazy. But people don't think about that. All they think about is, well, there is a chance and people do win. We see the outcome. We see that people do win. So maybe it could be me. So they try. And obviously the bigger the number, the more opportunity or in their heads. And so people play the lottery.
And people that do this, so often what can happen is people will buy a bunch of tickets. They'll put down a bunch of different numbers. They'll get all their hopes up and start thinking about, well, what will I do if I win? What will I take the lump sum? Will I take the 30-year annuity? What will I do with all the money? Who will I tell? Who will I not tell? They go through all these different scenarios, and then they end up losing because the odds aren't in their favor. Somebody else wins. That all goes away, and you're kind of left with this empty pit of, well, what did I do this for? Mm-hmm. How do you suggest people work through that? And really, even beyond that, before that, why do people get to go through all those scenarios before they even know if they're winning?
Because it's a fantasy and it's fun to think about and take your mind off of your day-to-day stresses and worries and think about something that could happen that's enjoyable and what life could be like if you had that amount of money, rather than, what life is like right now for them and how that would change. Obviously we see, on TV or read about just, how great people's lives are when they have all this money. We don't see the day-to-day and the reality of it, but, it's glorified and people think that it is what they want. So, and life will be easier if you just have all this money. So people think about it and fantasize about it and just don't focus on, it's much more enjoyable to focus on that than it is to focus on what's going on in your life right now.
And what's often overlooked, Dr. Schwartz, is in the situation of somebody that does win this amount of money or wins a fraction of this amount of money, if there are multiple people that have the right combination of numbers in this scenario with the Mega Millions drawing, is what comes after that. Because those events that come after that have a significant impact on people's lives as well. Many will try to remain as anonymous as possible, so as to not have all the fanfare surrounding them or following them and people popping up into their lives that haven't been in there for forever. But all of that can be exceedingly stressful too, trying to manage that part of your life. And so that should also be something that's being considered by people playing in these lotteries, particularly when there's such a large potential output as there is tonight, is the impact that winning and the circumstances of that victory can have on you afterward.
Yes, should is the word. Yes, people should think about it. They don't. And, I don't think anyone would know what to do with that amount of money if they had that amount of money. And they just think about the ways that they would spend it, not the reality of it or, what people are going to think if they know about it. I do think it's safer for people not to tell people about it if they do win, for a variety of reasons. But I think that, there may be, I mean, it's hard to come up with a plan ahead of time because I mean, nobody knows what to do with that necessarily. But I think, if you are one of the people who is lucky enough to win, whether it's all of it or part of it or a large amount of it, then I think it's important to, sit down with somebody that you trust or multiple people that you trust and have that conversation about what you're going to do with it and how to go forward. Working through anything, any type of problem, the best thing to do is to be able to talk to somebody about it. Have that community, have that support around you, and then you are able to make better, healthier decisions than if you're trying to do it on your own. So.
Yeah. And even before that, you think about the situation. You even said that people aren't often thinking about that when they are going into the situation because the likelihood of them winning is so small that's not even a consideration. But we talk about people thinking about what am I going to do with the money if I win? This is my plan. These are the things I want to do. This is what I'm going to buy the first day after. But they don't think about that other side. Where does that difference come into play psychologically between someone imagining what they're going to win? Of course, there's the element of fantasy versus that bit of reality too that should also be there of, well, what do I do if my numbers come up?
Well, the reality is when we're thinking about it in terms of fantasy, it's really our reptilian child part of our brain that just kind of makes impulsive decisions and isn't really thinking about the logical piece of it. So, when somebody is buying a lottery ticket, that's the part of the brain that's in use at the time. But then if they do win, then the adult side of the brain has to kick in and really think about the consequences of it. It's not all, fun and games. There is a lot of consequences to it. And being able to, approach it from a different perspective. So, it's one side that gets you a lottery ticket, and then it's another side if you win. So there's a big contrast and a big piece there that will get in the way of knowing how to think about it. And there's the initial shock if you do win also that comes into play also. So there's a lot of factors that people just they're not considering, they're not thinking about. It's just, okay, lottery system out here, I'm going to play. And then I'll deal with everything else later on. So, but I think, again, if you are lucky enough to win and be in that position, then there has to be a lot of support on your end to be able to make decisions going forward with that.
We're joined by Dr. Melanie Schwartz from Viewpoint Psychology and Wellness on the Michigan Megacast. Dr. Schwartz, changing gears as we are getting out of the month of July and going into the month of August. We're approaching back to school time. As wild as it is to think about that, with school having it feels like it just got out. For students going back to school, there's certain stresses that come along with that for students and for parents. On the student side, for those in particular who may not like school or may have some less than stellar experiences at school, what is your suggestion for parents and for other adults in their life to help them prepare psychologically to return to that environment and maybe even inspire some inspiration as they're heading back to school this fall?
Well, it's interesting that I'm talking about this right now because my clients have actually started to talk about it this week, whether it was my college kids or my younger clients. But we are starting to talk about it, especially the ones who don't enjoy going to school because, they struggle academically or socially or whatever it might be. And it is hard. It's a big stressor. They have that, they're free of that all summer long. And then, when you have to start talking about school again, about a month before it starts, then the anxiety starts to kick in again. A lot of times we really have to focus on what are the things you do like about school? There generally is one or two things that they do like, even if they might have to think really, really hard about it, but there is something. And to really focus on that and figure out ways to kind of, exaggerate that for them and help them focus on that. Sometimes it helps we call it reframing, help them look at school in a different way than just, oh, I hate this. I have to go and sit in a classroom, not understanding what I'm learning, or just sit through boring classes, or, the kids at my school are mean, or whatever it might be. Help them look at school in a different way in, what it's actually teaching you and how it's benefiting you rather than what you don't like about it. Because there are things about school that you are going to learn from, even if it's not taking a math class. You're still learning something from math that you will use in life. Maybe it's not calculus or geometry, but there are aspects that you will learn, such as problem solving, and just teach them to look at it in a different way than they're currently looking at it. And that seems to help them get through it a little easier.
We're joined by Dr. Melanie Schwartz on the Michigan Megacast. She is from Viewpoint Psychology and Wellness, joining us on today's program. As we also talk about back to school, you mentioned it. It's very interesting to consider it, because often when we talk about back to school, we focus on younger children in particular, or those in high school that are getting ready for big times in their life. We don't often talk about back to school in terms of our adult children, our college students, and particularly those that are going off to school for the first time. This is an extremely stressful experience for so many, in that it's different. It's a major change. You're off on your own for the first time. So what's some considerations that should be made, both from parents, but also from these young adults themselves, as they're heading into that environment, into that great unknown, and preparing really for the first time their full independent experience in a new environment?
I think from a parent perspective, it's very scary because it's the first time your child's out of the nest. And it's not, if it's your first child out of the nest, you don't know what to expect or what it will be like, and you're not going to have the same control that you have when they're in your house. So it's really being able to talk to other people who have been through it, and give them tips on how to get through having an empty nest, or even just, having one child gone, and really learning from other parents who have already been through it. In terms of kids, and I feel like I work with kids on this every year when they're starting college. It's stressful for them. They don't know anything else. They've never known anything except being at home for the most part. And to leave their home and their comfort and their safety to go to this place that they have no idea what to expect and what it's going to be like, it creates a lot of anxiety. And I think it's okay for them to be anxious. That's very normal for them. And I think it's important to normalize it, that all of their friends are feeling the same way. Some more than others, but they're all feeling the same way. To talk to each other about it, talk to their parents about it, talk to people who are in college and what they experienced with it, and just have your supports in place, because it's a huge transition, and it can be difficult. It can be more difficult for some rather than others, but majority of the kids I work with, they go, they love it, they have a great time, and they're like, I don't understand why I was so worried about it before. But it's normal to have that anticipation anxiety, and just to normalize it for them is important.
And so much of finding that comfort, or finding just at a basic level, that equilibrium in the college environment, is the social side of things. It's something that when I went off to school, I really struggled with. And I think that did play into a factor of my experience there taking a little bit longer to really get to that point of comfort than I particularly would have liked to. So for students that are going off to college, and so much of that experience being a social experience on top of being an educational experience, what's some advice you have for them in terms of going into that sort of a social environment, that where there is so much stimulus, there is so much activity, there's so many different people there, and you've ever been really experiencing an educational environment before, to put their best foot forward, but in a way that's comfortable for them, and not necessarily rushing them into a situation that could be very, very anxiety driven?
I think there's a wide variety of ways to approach this, because you're going to have your kids who are very outgoing and so excited to get there and socialize, and they have to learn the balance of what they can do. And so they're excited to go meet new friends and go, be part of the sorority or fraternities, or, go join all sorts of clubs and groups and teams, and some of them take on too much and it becomes very overwhelming for them. So I think they have to learn, and that's just through trial and error, how to balance that so that they can do their schoolwork and also enjoy their social life. The kids who are more introverted and struggle a little bit more socially, they also have to learn for themselves. Like, what's their comfort level? Where can they push themselves? Where do they have to kind of stay back a little bit and get their alone time and balance it out for themselves? So it looks different on different, ends of the spectrum, but it still comes down to that balance and figuring out for yourself where your comfort zone is, and pushing your comfort zone a little bit, but not too much where it's just going to create too much anxiety for you.
Dr. Schwartz, you touched on it just a little bit when we were first initially talking about college students going off to school for the first time, and parents becoming empty nesters, particularly those that are doing that for the first time. You gave some advice on how they can initiate that process, but it's well beyond just having their kids outside of the house for the first time and being independent that has an impact on parents. So for parents, what can they do to work through that new scenario in their life on their own, without necessarily being burdensome to their kids or checking in too often necessarily as their kids are out there?
I think they have to learn for themselves. It's a transition for them to, they have to learn how to be something other than parents again. Some parents are better at it than others, but they have to be able to, you spend 18 years focusing on your kids, and then all of a sudden everything is about the kids. And then all of a sudden they're not there and they're living their own lives, and you have to figure out what your life looks like again. So I think there's a learning curve with that, of understanding and picking up new hobbies, or taking on old hobbies, or making some new friends, or figuring out what you want your life to look like now, so that you can focus on yourself rather than how you spent the last 18 years. And it's difficult for a lot of parents, and there's definitely a learning curve with it. And it just takes some time, and again, trial and error, whether it's on the kid side or on the parent side, there's still trial and error with it.
We're joined by Dr. Melanie Schwartz from Viewpoint Psychology and Wellness on the Michigan Megacast. Dr. Schwartz, another minute or two with you before we'll need to say goodbye today. Anything else at this time that people should be keeping in mind psychologically, or other stressors that are out there that are commonly being seen in your practice and among your colleagues that we should be keeping mindful of and working toward coping with?
I think the world is scarier than I think it's been in a long time for people, or where people are aware of it. And it's really affecting people. It's affecting their moods. People are more angry across the board, which really comes from anxiety, and being able to recognize that. And there's just a lot of emotions that are running wild right now. And people are having a hard time dealing with it. They really are. And I think you have zero control over someone else's behavior. You do control your own behavior, and making sure you're working on yourself constantly, and recognizing, how my behavior impacts others, the things that are stressing me out. How can I cope with it in an effective way? If you don't know how, then, talk to family, talk to friends, talk to a therapist, somebody, so that you can, you're not part of the problem that's out there, that you're part of the solution. And I think that if more of us did that, then we'd be in a better place. But people are very reactive right now, and for a lot of different reasons, understandably. And it's hard. It's hard to navigate right now.
Dr. Schwartz, appreciate your insight on all these variety of topics and helping us through what is continuing to be a tough and more interesting time day by
Yes.
day. Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Mhm. Of course.